Let's talk about your business's profitability. I think this is a conversation that every single founder needs to be having, and particularly if you sell wholesale or if you're thinking about selling wholesale, you 100,000,000% need to be focusing on your profitability from day one. I think a lot of founders are actively avoiding this conversation, or they know that there's something off but aren't quite sure how to even figure out how to become profitable or what the issue is in their business. So we're going to talk about that today. We are not focusing on how to get more wholesale orders, how to grow your revenue, how to increase your orders, because actually you shouldn't be even focusing on that until you know that your foundation is really rock solid and you're dialed in with your pricing and your profitability, so that when you get the influx in orders, when your fair takes off, when your pitches start converting at a rapid pace, you're good to go. You don't have to kind of backtrack, right? So I want to be really direct with you from the start. I think a lot of brands look successful from the outside. They might think that they're successful in the service. You might think that they're successful because of what you're seeing them posting on social media. But actually on the back end, they are, let's just say, threadbare. Their profit margins are so slim at the end of the day that they could barely pay themselves, or they're not able to pay themselves what they should be making, or they're not able to grow their team. They can barely keep their head above water. We don't want that for you. And maybe you are in that position right now where you're like, I look like I'm really successful, but I'm so embarrassed and ashamed because behind the scenes, I'm not profitable. I'm barely able to pay the bills or pay myself. We don't want you to feel ashamed. There's no shame in that. We're going to talk about some things you can do to identify what you could fix. And this is a lot of the work that I do with my clients or inside the Rewired Retail Mastermind. We talk about pricing and how to set yourself up for success. Okay. So no shame here. We're just going to talk about it. Okay. We want you to grow your business so that you have orders coming in and you can look at your revenue number and feel really good about it because you know that your profitability is following right behind. Okay. So let's talk about whether or not your wholesale business is actually profitable. We're going to talk through just a framework that will help you to understand, wrap your head around your real numbers, what common, let's say, profitability traps are, and ones that can really drain your margin when you're not even realizing it, and then how you can figure out what to do if you want to run this math and you don't love what you see. So here's the good news though. If your wholesale margins are tighter than they should be, it's totally fixable. You have a lot of levers that you can pull, but you can't pull those levers until you know where you stand and which ones are actually going to move the needle for you. Okay, so let's get into the episode.
Real quick before we jump in, if you're pitching retailers but second guessing what to say, when to say it, or how to follow up without feeling like you're being totally annoying, you need the Buyer Side Pitch Kit. It arms you with everything you need to confidently pitch all types of retailers, from independent boutiques to mid-size to big box stores, because yes, they all expect something a bit different and at different times. You're going to get the Buyer Side Pitch Pal, which is your own AI pitch assistant trained by me, a seasoned corporate and independent retail buyer, to write your pitch and follow-up emails for you in your unique brand voice. Plus, you're going to get an entire kit of buyer back strategies, perfectly timed pitch plans, and plug and play email templates that sound just like your brand, but maybe just a bit more polished and a bit more persuasive. You're also going to get 2 awesome bonuses, the follow-up formula and a pitch cadence calendar, so you can map out exactly what to send and when to send it and when to follow up. The Buyer Side Pitch Kit will absolutely make pitching so much easier for you. And the best part, it's not even $100. So just hit the link in the show notes or DM me Pitch Kit on Instagram at Kristen Fisher Coaching, and I will send it your way. All right, now let's get into the chat.
Now, before we dig into, we'll just say this framework, I want to spend a couple minutes on why profitability is so commonly miscalculated. Understanding that mistake just helps you to avoid making it. And the core problem is that most product founders think about their margin at the product level, right? Think about how many times you've thought, well, all my products are at 80% margin, 85% margin, so I'm good. My product is priced the right way, so I'm good to go. The difference between what they sell a product for at wholesale and what it costs to make it is where you get that margin number. And the math is important, right? You need to make sure you are starting at that foundation of, is my product priced right? And if you don't have that figured out, let's start there. But it's incomplete. It's not giving you the whole picture. It leaves out a whole category of costs that are really real and directly tied to your business in general, but we're specifically talking about wholesale today. And that has to be covered by that wholesale revenue if you're going to be profitable. The revenue you're bringing in for wholesale needs to cover your expenses and then some. Okay. So here's a simple way to think about it. Your wholesale revenue minus your cost of goods is just your gross margin. Okay. Wholesale revenue minus your cost of goods, gross margin. And that's what the number I would say a lot of people stop at, particularly newer brands or newer business owners. It's like, okay, my gross margin is good. I have a rough idea of my expenses, so I think I'm good to go. But your gross margin isn't your profit. That's just like the pool of money that you have left before you pay everything else. So everything else includes so many things that are constantly rising. So you got your shipping costs, your packaging materials, your fair commission, right? If you have a wholesale rep, that eats up profitability. The time that you spend fulfilling orders and managing accounts, or maybe you have someone doing that for you. All the apps that you pay for, your Shopify expenses, the overhead that supports your wholesale operation, all of that gets then pulled out of that profit or out of that gross margin. And you're left at the end of the day with your profitability. So when you subtract all of that from your gross margin, you get something closer to that actual profit per wholesale order. A lot of brands, or I should say like for a lot of brands, that number is much smaller than you think it is. Sometimes it's dramatically smaller. And when you actually look at it, it's like, oh, well, no wonder I can barely pay myself, or no wonder I am constantly chasing my tail. When I have to place an order for inventory, I can barely pay it for any other bills, because we're not really looking at those individual expenses and how it ties into your profitability and what you're left with at the end. And that also comes down to your open to buy and a cash flow to make sure you can place inventory orders without going in the hole and all of that, which whole separate conversation. Today we're just talking about just kind of at the bigger picture of your profitability. So the first thing you really want to do is just to calculate your full profitability, not just your gross margin, and not just stop at what's my product margin, my product profitability. Okay. So you want your actual per order profit after all those costs are taken out. And so when you're just looking at your total business profitability, you're missing a really key picture. And this is what I see happen a lot of times. So your total business might be profitable. So like, let's just say at the end of the tax season, you get that report back from your accountant or your bookkeeper or whoever, and you're like, oh, look, I was profitable last year. Awesome. I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. It might not feel super comfortable, but it's more comfortable for me to keep doing what I'm doing versus actually changing anything. Also a whole other conversation. But your business might look profitable at the total level, but you might be leaking profit under the covers at certain channels. So let's just say with wholesale being sold at like generally 50 or 60% of your MSRP, probably 50% for most of you listening, plus the commissions that you're paying to Fair, if you're on Fair, to a rep, if you're selling to a rep, right? Let's just take out the commissions. That's an obvious first spot to look into. So your wholesale, that's why we're focusing on wholesale, because I think when you drill down, this is where it gets dicey. If you aren't selling wholesale yet, then you need to get this dialed in before you start, because otherwise it's like you're just filling a leaky bucket with water. You're going to never be profitable because you're going to keep dumping sales in, and then the money is just trickling out of those holes in the bucket. Okay. So let's walk through the costs that need to be accounted for in every wholesale order that you fulfill. So the obvious one, cost of goods, no surprise here. But if you're newer to this, it's what you paid to manufacture the product. Okay, so if you make it yourself, it includes materials, labor costs, including your own time, which I'll come back to. If you manufacture with a production partner, this is your landed LDP unit cost from them after they've shipped it to you, landed in your hands. So the next one then is packaging. So we've got your cost of goods, and we've got your packaging. So this is not your product packaging. This or not just, I should say, not just your product packaging, but it's really your shipping materials. So boxes, tissue paper, tape, bubble wrap, labels, any branded inserts that you include, whatever you're using, dividers if you sell glassware or candles, right? So these feel small per unit, but it really adds up fast. You want every penny to count here. And especially if you're shipping smaller orders, it really adds up because the cost per unit goes up, right? If you have a smaller order, it's like, whatever, I'm not going to keep going into that, but you know what I'm trying to say here. Okay, then you've got your shipping. So on Fair, you have the options, right? You have Fair subsidized shipping, you've got self-shipping, you have the retailer covering shipping. So Fair's subsidized shipping is convenient, but it has costs that are embedded in that model. If you're self-shipping, you know exactly what you're spending per order. But either way, this cost needs to be in your calculation. You can amortize it and just do an average, just to kind of assume that there's going to be X percent of a total order will be a shipping cost, just kind of across the board, just to figure it out. Because it's like, obviously, there's going to be different scenarios for shipping costs. So Fair's commission is something a lot of brands mentally assign to the cost of having a Fair account. I'm putting that in quotes, the cost of having a Fair account, rather than a per order cost. But it is a per order cost. So Fair takes that commission on every order placed through the marketplace. Obviously, that's why you're trying to always get direct orders through Fair for your pitching. And that's like when you can really get the profitability going. But when the algorithm takes off for you, you're going to get more orders through the marketplace. You do want this to happen. You do want that to happen. I know so many people are always complaining about Fair's commission. I get it. It sucks. But if you have a sales rep, you're paying them commission. And that used to be the way of doing wholesale. It was only through reps if you wanted to really scale yourself because you had someone else doing the selling for you. You have to pay them to do that. So paying a commission on Fair is the cost of doing wholesale business. And whether that's right or wrong, it's part of business. That was my little side rant. But what you want to think about is Fair takes that commission on every order placed through the marketplace. And on new accounts, it's higher. On repeat accounts, it's lower. You need to know your average effective Fair commission rate and build that into your margin math. So just take an average percent commission and apply it so that you're just assuming the, let's just say, worst case scenario. And if you end up having more direct orders without that commission, great. You can change it at the end of the year when you get your actual. But let's start with this is the worst case scenario and build your profitability around the worst case scenario, because then it's just gravy, right? It's just bonus profitability. If you're using sales reps, add that commission too, right? So it's 10 to 15% of the wholesale price right off the top, going to whatever commission structure you've got going with whoever you're using, sales rep, broker, Fair, etc. Okay. Now we're thinking about fulfillment. So you've got the fulfillment labor. And this is the place where I think it's more ambiguous, and I think it gets consistently undercounted or left out entirely. Although I think most of you are thinking about, okay, the fulfillment labor. But where it gets tricky is when you are the person doing the fulfillment. It's like, how do I account for that, right? But it takes time to pick, pack, and ship a wholesale order that has a cost associated with it. Your time is money. If you're doing it yourself, obviously that's your time. And your time has a lot of value, even if you're not paying yourself a formal salary, which you should be. It doesn't have to be a lot. You can pay yourself a little bit and build up towards it. But your time is valuable. If you have employees or contractors helping with your fulfillment, like if you have seasonal employees that just kind of come in and they just get paid a certain, a couple $100 a year, then they're just considered a contractor. Great. Or if you have an actual W-2 employee, wherever you're at with it, right? You're paying them directly. And if you're using a fulfillment center, they take a cut of every unit of inventory that they're storing for you and a fee for packing every order. So that adds up as well. Okay. So thinking about, how am I pricing this out? How am I accounting for the cost of fulfillment, whether you have a team or not? So how long does it take you or your team to fulfill an average wholesale order? Let's start there. And even if it's just like 15, 20 minutes, multiply that by your hourly rate or the rate that you would pay somebody else to do it. And that's the real cost. So this is a way to think about I'm doing it right now. I barely pay myself. What's my hourly rate? I don't know. This isn't about your hourly rate because you're doing a job that ultimately will not belong to you. You're doing a job that as you scale will be going to employees, staff, other people that you're going to be paying. So, what would you pay other people to come in and do this and have that be your hourly rate for this specific task? Okay. So, you're going to take the amount of time that it takes to fulfill one order on average, multiply that by your hourly rate, and that's your real cost. Okay. And when you add all of this up, the cost of goods, the packaging, the shipping, packaging, the actual shipping itself, the platform commission, rep commission, if that's applicable to you, fulfillment labor, you get your total cost of fulfilling a wholesale order. Okay. Subtract that from your wholesale revenue, and that's your actual profit. So you can go ahead and you can just look at that calculation for a few of your recent orders to just get a feel for, am I more profitable than I think I am? Am I less profitable than I think I am? Like, what's my real number? You don't have to do this big fancy report. Just pull some raw data from Fair. Just get your last couple orders and do the math. And I would recommend looking at a couple different sizes of orders so you can see what your margin looks like, what your profitability looks like for different sized orders. Because what I was starting to say before, it's like your shipping box, the price of that doesn't really change, right? So if you have a smaller order, your packaging materials, you might be using less of them, but the cost per order is a little higher for the shipping materials on a smaller order than a bigger one when you kind of amortize it across that whole order. Hopefully that makes sense. So do that calculation for a few recent orders, see what comes out. From there, I want you to think about this. This is a big one. Here's where I'm at today. Here is where I'm at today with my profitability. What about when I scale? I have these big goals for my business. I envision myself scaling to X amount of revenue. Or maybe I don't want it to be this massive business, but I do want it to grow. And whatever that growth, whatever scale looks like for you, here's where I'm at today. What about when I scale? Do I have room in my margins right now for growth without anything else changing? Okay. Without anything else changing, do I have room in my margins for growth? I'll tell you why I'm saying this. And this is something I personally learned the hard way. I really had like my product offering dialed in, all the buyer things dialed in, but I had never scaled a business from top to bottom before, right? I was a buyer for corporate retail. So yeah, I was buying with $100 million budgets and doing all the things there, but I wasn't dealing with like the P&L of that business. So like this was a learning curve for me. So I learned this the hard way, and I had to reverse engineer during peak selling season, and it was kind of a nightmare. And I just was like, whoa, okay, big learning lesson, big learning curve here. When I had my first, I wouldn't say my first holiday season because it wasn't my first. A few years in, I had my best ever, we'll say this, best ever holiday season. It was 2020. Yeah, it was 2020, best ever holiday season. And it was, I think like September. And I was like, oh my God, my holiday is going to be absolutely wild. Like, I don't have the capacity for this. I have to figure out, I need more staff. I need people to come in and support me. I don't have the right packaging pricing. So in season, as I'm selling, I'm like, I want all these sales. So I was doing all this outreach. I was pitching my business left and right. And I was landing these big custom gifting orders for major companies. And all of a sudden, I recognized I need to figure this out because I'm doing all this selling, but I don't have the infrastructure and the pricing right to actually be profitable. I was going to lose money on my best season ever. And I'm like, oh my God, not good, not good. So I had to reverse engineer my packaging because it was particularly packaging the products because I was buying wholesale directly from brands. So I was a little bit stuck with what I had there, but I really had to reverse engineer my packaging because I realized I had zero room for growth. And I was frantically trying to source lower cost, but high quality, because that was really important to me, packaging. I was trying to negotiate better pricing with my existing suppliers. I was reaching out to brands saying, hey, like I typically buy from you on Fair. Can I buy from you direct? I know that's like a big no-no, but I had to negotiate pricing for these larger purchase orders because I was usually placing an order for 100 units of something. Now I need 1,000 units. So I was trying to negotiate to get better pricing to be able to pay for this increase in seasonal help. And it didn't feel good to be chasing my tail in season, but it was a big learning lesson for me. So I ask you to think about when you scale, when you hit that next level, you're doing all this outreach for wholesale, you're pitching. What if a massive retailer comes to you right now and says, I want 10,000 units, making that up? What would you do? Could you fulfill it? How would you fulfill it? Would you lose money on it if you scrambled the way I did? I don't want you to be scrambling and losing money. I don't think I actually lost money that season, but I was not nearly as profitable as I could have been had I had the foresight to think, okay, here's where I'm at now, but what does this look like when I scale? And just have a plan in place for that. So do you have room in your margins for your growth? And if you don't right now, what will that look like as you grow? Identifying now what you would negotiate to get a better cost, whether that's on your raw materials, whether that's on the actual product itself, if you are sourcing and producing overseas, the full product, whether that's packaging, have suppliers in your back pocket. Just prepare yourself for that next level. Okay. So in my work, when I'm working with founders, there are 3 profitability traps. I'm going to just keep using that. Profitability traps that show up most consistently, I would say. And I want to walk through each one of these because I think recognizing them is kind of your first step of fixing it. And just knowing what you're working with helps you to figure out how to get yourself to a more profitable place. And you can work towards it. It's not an overnight thing. So the first trap is a low opening order minimum problem. I see this so often. Not only are brands setting their opening minimum order too low, sometimes it's really low, but what I'll say is, let me scratch that. A lot of wholesale brands set their opening minimum too low, sometimes like really, really low, because they want to be they want accessibility to new accounts. They want new accounts to come in and say, oh, I can easily pay this $100 opening order. Let's just buy from these brands that all have low minimums. And I get why your instinct is that lower barrier of entry means more accounts, right? But the math problem that you run into, if your opening minimum order is really low, let's say $100, and your average cost to fulfill that order, including your packaging, shipping, labor, is like $50 plus your fair commission, then you're working with hardly anything left over, right? So if you're offering free or subsidized shipping on those small orders, you might actually then be losing money on that fulfillment. And we don't want that. Small orders from new accounts are the most expensive to fulfill, proportionally speaking. So it doesn't mean you should stop accepting them. That new account acquisition is super valuable and it has, lifetime value that extends far beyond the first order because they're going to come back and buy from you time and time again because they're going to love your product so much. But you need to know the real cost of that first order so you're making a really deliberate decision and you're not just like accidentally subsidizing new accounts at a loss, right? So thinking about where are you setting yourself at that opening order minimum and your reorder minimum to make sure you're positioning yourself right for not only those first orders coming in, but also as you continue to grow. It can also be a red flag if you have a really low minimum. And I know Fair, if you're on Fair, says to be at $150 as part of their algorithm to keeping you or getting you to top shop. So if that's super important to you, something to think about, it's not the make or break. You can be over 150 and still be a top shop, but it's something to think about. I'm really talking when you get down to like that $99 price point or opening minimum, that feels really, really low. Okay. The second trap is over assortment. Over assortment, meaning you have too many products. When you have too many SKUs, too many individual products, your production runs are smaller per SKU. Your cost per unit goes up. Your storage costs go up because you have more things to fit on the shelf, right? You end up with slow moving inventory that ties up your cash. We don't want that. From a buyer's perspective, I would much rather see a brand with, let's say, 15 really focused, well-priced, clear bestsellers than a brand with 50 products across too many categories. You can adjust this based on your unique industry and niche. Like I know I have a lot of stationery brands that listen. So if you have 300 products as a buyer, I'm like, I don't really know where to focus. I don't know what I need to be buying from this brand, but maybe you need to go down to 200 or 250. And then you can go, you're tightening up the assortment. You can go deeper on each item, meaning you have more inventory, you can market to it. So you're going deeper not only on how you're stocking it, but also your energy on how much energy you're putting into those best sellers. When you do that, you have better unit economics. The more clearly a buyer can understand what you stand for, and therefore you're going to make more money off of each unit of inventory or each product SKU that you're carrying. If your margins are feeling really thin, and you have a large number of SKUs, assortment editing is often one of the fastest paths to get profitability moving in the right direction. Something we do inside the Rewired Retail, I built out a really cool AI tool that helps my mastermind members to dig into their total product offering and identify where they have opportunities to cut or add based on my buyer insights. It's really, really cool. I'm obsessed with assortment editing because there's so much clarity you can get whenever you identify where you have room to become more profitable. You get more excited about what you're intentionally building and designing when you have that clarity. The third trap is pricing, product pricing that has not been revisited in a long time. Maybe it's since you launched, maybe it's since 2020, because I know around that time you had to do your price increases, but since then things have continued to go up year after year after year. Costs have gone up, material costs have gone up, shipping goes up, labor goes up, platform fees change. How many times have we gotten an email saying, letting you know that in 2 months this app that you belong to or that you subscribe to is going up? And you're like, what? A lot of brands set their wholesale pricing when they launch. They do this exercise at the beginning, making sure that they are in a good place before they fully understood the full scope of their costs. And they haven't really revisited it since. Or maybe you know you need to raise them, but you're just kind of afraid of what your customers are going to think. Please know that everybody everywhere has been raising prices. You as a consumer have paid more for the products you're buying. You have to stay in step with the market to be able to have your business continue to grow and be profitable. Okay. So the hard truth is your pricing needs to cover your costs plus have that healthy margin at wholesale, and it needs to leave your retail partners enough room to market up to a retail price that their customer is going to pay, and so that they can still, as the retailer, make a healthy margin. Right? Like this is the trickle up or trickle down, I don't really know, where you have to have your margins in line, and then the retailer also has to have their margin in line. Right? That's the full margin stack. It has to work at every level. So as you know, you can't outprice yourself. You can't price yourself out of the market. You have to be in tune with that. And so this is where a lot of like market research comes into play of understanding your pricing. And this is also something we do inside the mastermind because we want to make sure that you're priced in the right ways to be able to do this, but also have it make sense in the market. So if your cost of goods has increased significantly since you set your most current pricing, and in this current environment of, tariffs and rising production costs, a lot of brands are in this position. Your margin has just compressed, whether you realize it or not. If you aren't doing this work, you might not realize how much it's actually compressed, because that one-off email from the app provider saying, oh, hey, this cost is going up, gets easily overlooked because you're like, all right, whatever, it's another $5 per month, add it to the list. But that adds up. And when you take it and you look at it in terms of cost per order, it gets a little, I don't want to say scary, but it gets more clear of all of those little costs adding up. And when you drill it down to your actual cost, your margin that you have at the end of all those costs coming out of a wholesale order, it's like, oh, now I see why I'm chasing my tail. So revisiting your pricing annually is a really healthy practice. You don't need to do this for every SKU. I would say to really identify your best sellers and look into that regularly. And that would be negotiating your pricing your cost and revisiting your pricing. So you want to be looking at and running the numbers on your cost structure at least once a year. And this could be something you do in December as you're going into a new year. Okay. So if you run through all these numbers and you're like, well, this isn't great, what do? We don't panic, right? We don't panic. We listen to this episode again, save this episode, come back to it. You don't immediately just say, I have to raise all my prices. I'm never going to survive unless I raise my prices. And it might be the right move if you haven't done that in a long time, but it's not necessarily the only move and it's not always the first move. So the way I'd look at kind of like diagnosing and then fixing a margin problem is, like I said, start with those best sellers. Which products have the healthiest margins? Which ones are you selling the most of and making the most money on? These are the products that are like at the core of your business. The core of your business, we'll say that you're evergreen, and your marketing needs to reflect that. Your website, your D2C, your marketing efforts, your emails, your fair page should lead with them. Your outreach to retailers should feature them. Your production line needs to prioritize them. They need to be your like workhorses. Then you want to look at your slow movers. What are the margins on those ones? And to really identify, are they actually contributing to your profitability, or are they creating cost and complexity and not giving you much return? And so that's when you can start to see, okay, do some products need to be retired? Not necessarily because they're bad products, because they're not really worth the operational cost of continuing to produce them at smaller quantities. Maybe it takes more of your time. Maybe the margin's lower just because they have a material in them that's more expensive. Really just evaluate whether or not these products need to stay in your line from an operational cost perspective. Then looking at your order size distribution, what percent of your orders are above your target order value versus below it? So if a lot of your orders are small, closer to that opening order minimum, that's a lever you can pull. You can raise your opening order minimum even slightly, or create a tiered structure if you're, for selling direct wholesale, where smaller orders carry a slightly higher price, and that can improve your average cost or average order economics really significantly. You can't do that on fair, but that's just something to consider. And then then look at your pricing. If your cost structure has changed and your margins have compressed and your pricing adjustments then need to be taken into account. You might need to actually raise prices. And again, not across the board. It could just be on certain products that will really move the needle. The good news is most independent retailers fully understand that costs go up. If their costs go up from you, their costs go up to their consumer. We know that is how that works. But it has to happen. It's business. So a clear professional communication about a price adjustment given with plenty of lead time is always going to be received better than you think, because they understand they're in business also. It's really important, though, that you give them plenty of time to place reorders at the lower cost, give them that runway, because they not only are relying on that profit from you, but they are then passing that cost on to their customers. So that's work for them to have to reprice, whether it's ticketing in the store, whether it's adjusting on the website. It's work that they then have to do. And time is money. So that's cost for them to make those changes. So you just want to be respectful of that workflow that happens kind of like downstream from what happens after you change a price. You have to do what's right for your business and be respectful and understanding of those that you're dealing with, and make sure that they are very clear on it, on what is coming down the pipeline in terms of a cost change, whether that's cost, MSRP, or both. Okay. So zooming out for a second, I want to just say, or just talk about why it is so important, why getting this right matters beyond just kind of that immediate financial picture. Wholesale profitability is the foundation of everything else you want to build. When you're thinking about how you're scaling your business, how you're growing your business, your wholesale profitability needs to be dialed in. If you want to hire help to support you with your wholesale orders, you need the margin to fund it. If you want to invest in product photography, a new product launch, a course, a trade show booth, coaching, all these things require cash flow, and that comes from profitable sales. It does not come from your revenue. It comes from your profitability. Okay. A business that looks busy but is not actually generating a healthy profit is not positioned to grow sustainably, right? You're just kind of like running on that hamster wheel and you're just staying in place. You're really busy, maybe looking great while you're doing it, but you're just staying in place. You're not moving forward. So I say this not to stress you out, but I say it to empower you, right? The brands that really build scalable, sustainable businesses, particularly wholesale businesses, are the ones who are not afraid of their numbers. Might be afraid at first because you don't know, but that fine tuning that muscle and really looking at those numbers and getting comfortable with it early will make you such a stronger, better business owner. You have to make those hard decisions about pricing in your assortment. You have to say no to things that don't financially make sense, even if you have been doing it for a while. You have to have that ability to say no to things. You have to focus your energy on the retailers, on the products that are actually profitable for you. And that discipline is what creates the cash flow to invest in your growth. And that's what makes the difference between a wholesale business that feels really chaotic and one that feels really in control. And you deserve a business that feels in control. Okay. So your takeaway before we close this chat out, your wholesale profitability is not your revenue. It's your revenue minus the cost of fulfilling every order. So your cost of goods, packaging, shipping, platforms, commissions, reps, right? Your fulfillment labor. Run this calculation for your last, let's say 5 to 10 orders. You can take an average, and that's your real cost per order profit. Then look at your profitability traps. Low opening order minimums on smaller orders. What does that actually do to your profitability? Your over assortment, driving up unit cost, tying up inventory, which is cash. Maybe it's your pricing you have not revisited in a while. Look at those 3 traps. And if some of your numbers need work, start with your best sellers. Start with your best sellers. Make sure they are front and center. They are priced right. If there's room for negotiating, go out and negotiate a better cost on the raw goods, materials, landed price, whatever your business structure is. Edit your assortment if you've got too much, right? Really revisit that pricing with this full margin stack in mind. Okay. And that is the math that will really make your wholesale business sustainable as you're growing. You don't need to, please no, you do not need to drop what you're doing and run to figure this out right now. As always, anything I share on this podcast is just here to, guide you, help you build a more sustainable and profitable business. Never ever to make you feel behind or like you have to immediately go and do something. It's just sharing strategies to help you as you're growing your business. So if you're like, this episode about threw me over the edge because now I don't know, just hit save on this episode, email it to yourself or put it like in a notes app, put it in a note on a calendar invite for yourself in the future to dig into this when you're doing your quarterly planning or your annual planning, or you're working on a new collection or sourcing materials. Then come back and listen to this and do it. If now is not the right time, don't stress yourself out over it, but know that this is a strategy that is really foundational that will help you to be more profitable and will help you to stop spinning your wheels in the future. So it's important work. So maybe if you catch yourself starting to do something that is like, I need to create a bunch of social media posts, do you? Or would this be a better exercise to do to make sure you're profitable so that when you sell the product from those social media posts, you make more money? All right. So that's a wrap on today's episode. I know we went into kind of some like dense territory, but I do think this is one of the most valuable conversations you can have about your wholesale business. And I hope that it just gives you clarity and kind of like an honest, more chill starting point so you can evaluate where you stand in your business and know that you have that clear path going forward for growth. Now, if you are on the Fair platform and you want that structured framework to optimize your entire Fair presence, so your page, your pricing, your buyer outreach, your email automations, all of it working together with the foundation of this profitability, I want to invite you to the Fair Success Blueprint. I'm teaching this live on September 17th. I'm completely overhauling this workshop for 2026. I'm updating it with the most current, new, relevant strategies, things that have changed on the Fair platform, and just generally how retailers and buyers have been shifting their buying behaviors. I'm going to walk you through the exact strategy that my clients and my students go through to see really incredible results on this platform. and show you how top performing brands on Fair are set up and how you can apply this strategy to your own business. And whether or not you're already a top shop or you're just starting out on Fair, this will apply to you. Okay. So we're going to get you really just crushing it on that platform. And the thing is, you're going to make so much money because you've already done all this profitability work. You're really clear on where to be profitable, how to be profitable, and you can apply it to this strategy for the Fair platform. So grab the link in the show notes. Join me on September 17th for the free Fair Success Blueprint workshop, and I'll see you in the next chat. Hey friend, quick question for you. Are you feeling stuck with how to get your brand to stand out on Fair? I'm asking you because as a buyer myself, I can tell you that there are just so many brands out there vying for the attention of these buyers, but I know that your brand has something so special and it needs to be seen. I put together a private podcast for you that goes deeper into what buyers are really looking for on the Fair platform and how you can stand out from the crowd to grow your wholesale business and really land those dream buyers. So if this resonates with you, head to the link in the show notes for instant access. Thanks so much for spending some time with me today. If you are loving the show, I would be so beyond grateful if you would rate and review the podcast and share it with one of your biz besties to help spread the word. I hope that you absolutely crush your sales this week. I'll be back to chat with you next Monday.